All right, so are you ready to dive into the fascinating world of Indian goat farming?
Absolutely. When you suggested this topic, I knew we were in for a treat.
I've been looking through this 2024 research paper, Unlocking the Potential, the current state of goat farming in India, and wow, there's so much to unpack.
It's an incredible resource, really highlights how important India is in global goat farming.
I was blown away by the sheer number of goats in India, over 148 million. That's more than the population of most countries.
It's a staggering number. To put it into perspective, that's almost 14% of all the goats in the world.
14%, wow. Are the goats evenly distributed throughout the country, or are there certain areas with a higher concentration?
Just like with any agricultural activity, there are regional variations.
Makes sense.
This research points to Rajasthan as the leading state in goat population, followed by West Bengal.
Interesting. Okay, so when you talk about Indian goats, are we talking about one specific type, or is there more to it?
Oh, get ready for this. India actually has an incredible diversity of goat breeds, 39 to be exact, officially recognized breeds.
39. Seriously, I had no idea. I always just pictured, well, goats. What are some of the key differences between these breeds?
Think of it like dog breeds, but for goats. You've got dairy breeds, specifically for milk production, meat breeds that are prized for their size, dual-purpose breeds good for both.
Okay.
And let's not forget the fiber producers.
Fiber producers, now you're speaking my language. I will admit, besides cashmere, I'm drawing a blank on other goat fibers.
Well, cashmere actually comes from goats, the Pashmina goat, which are found in the Himalayas.
Oh, okay.
But let's get back to those breeds. We're talking black Bengal goats,
Yeah.
known for their adaptability. Then you have the Jamunapari, which is instantly recognizable.
Recognizable, how so?
Let's just say they have very unique ears.
Huh, interesting.
But beyond those visual differences,
Hmm.
each breed has been carefully bred for generations for specific traits.
That's fascinating. 39 recognized breeds is impressive. But what about all the other goats? The research mentioned that 63.5% are nondescript. What does that even mean in the goat world?
You're right, that's a significant portion of the goat population in India.
Hmm.
Essentially, it means they haven't been selectively bred to conform to a specific breed standard.
Yeah.
They might have mixed ancestry.
So like a mutt, but for goats.
Exactly. Or they just haven't been incorporated into any formal breeding programs.
So there's this untapped potential in their genes.
Precisely. That's what has researchers excited.
I bet.
By understanding the genetics of these nondescript goats, who knows what valuable traits could be identified?
That's really cool. So let's talk about what these goats are actually used for. And I'm not just talking about being adorable. What are the main products?
Well, you're right. Their cuteness is just the beginning. Let's start with the classics. Milk and meat.
The staples of so many cultures around the world. I'm guessing with that massive goat population, India is producing a significant amount of both.
More than significant. They're the global leader.
Really?
India is the #1 producer of goat milk in the world.
Wow, the number one, that's impressive. What does that even mean for the global dairy market? Could Indian goat cheese be next?
It's definitely a possibility. India already contributes a significant amount to global goat milk production. The potential is there for them to become a major exporter.
Wow, all those cheese boards out there might have a little taste of India in the near future. But I'm guessing milk and meat are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to goat products, right? You mentioned fiber earlier.
Absolutely. And this is where it gets even more interesting. We touched on Pashmina wool, but there's so much more to it than just cozy sweaters and scarves. Pashmina wool, it's sourced from those high-altitude Pashmina goats. It's a huge part of the Indian economy.
I can imagine.
It's not just a luxury fiber. It represents a source of income for so many farmers and artisans, especially in those Himalayan regions where, other forms of agriculture can be tough.
That's really cool. It's amazing how something as simple as goat hair can have such a big impact. But wait, there's more to goat-derived products, right?
Right. Their manure is an incredibly valuable fertilizer.
Oh, right, of course.
And we often think of leather as coming from cows, but goat hide also has its uses. It's really about making the most of what these animals provide.
That makes sense. It's like that saying, waste not, want not. But like with any type of farming, I'm sure there are challenges and opportunities that are unique to goat farming in India. What does the research say about that?
This paper actually lays it all out in a really clear way. It does a SWOT analysis, looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
A SWOT analysis. Interesting. So let's start with the strengths. I'm guessing that whole being the number one global producer thing is a pretty big plus.
Absolutely. That's definitely up there, but it's more than just numbers. A major advantage is the low investment cost. Compared to other types of livestock, goats are pretty low maintenance.
Right, you don't exactly need tons of land to raise goats. I mean, they seem to eat just about anything.
Exactly. They're adaptable to all sorts of environments. Whether it's a dry region like Rajasthan or the cooler Himalayas, there are Indian goat breeds that do well in all sorts of conditions. And then you've got the variety of products, the milk, the meat, the fiber, the manure, that definitely adds to the industry's resilience.
It sounds like they've got a lot going for them. But you mentioned SWOT, so let's talk about the weaknesses. What are some of the challenges that goat farming in India faces?
One of the big ones is the lack of organized infrastructure in some areas.
So are you saying that while things might be working well for individual farmers, scaling up to meet bigger demands could be tough?
That's one way to put it. There's a need for better access to modern breeding technologies and ways to connect farmers with those larger markets.
Makes sense.
The research also highlights the need for better veterinary care networks to prevent diseases and keep those goats healthy.
That's important. Healthy goats mean a healthier industry overall. So those are some of the weaknesses. What about the opportunities? Where's the potential for growth?
This is where things get exciting. There's a ton of interest, even globally, in the potential of Indian goat farming. We touched on those nondescript goats.
Right, the ones that haven't been specifically bred for certain traits.
Exactly. Imagine what we could do if we could really unlock the secrets of their genetic diversity.
You're talking about developing new breeds that are even better milk producers, or maybe have even softer, more luxurious wool.
That's the idea. And it ties into another opportunity, creating those value-added products. Imagine new types of Indian goat cheese taking the world by storm, or using pashmina wool in totally new and innovative ways.
Now, that's what I'm talking about. But is this actually happening, or is it just speculation at this point?
There's definitely movement in these directions. There are government initiatives to support the industry.
Oh, really? Like what?
For example, there's the All India Coordinated Research Project, AICRP for short. They're focused on improving and conserving goat breeds.
It's great to see that kind of support for what might seem like a more traditional industry.
And it's important to remember that it's not just about the money. This is about livelihoods. Millions of people in India depend on this.
That's a good point.
Supporting goat farming helps entire communities.
Absolutely. It's about supporting a way of life. But let's not forget about the T and SWOT threats. What are some of the challenges that could pop up?
Just like with any farming, climate change is a concern. Things like rising temperatures and unpredictable rain can disrupt everything.
Of course. It's something everyone's thinking about.
Making sure the industry is sustainable means dealing with those changing conditions.
Right. And it's not just the weather, is it? There's always the possibility of diseases, changing global demands. Who knows what the future holds?
You're right, it's a complex situation. But what I've gathered from this research is that Indian goat farming is incredibly resilient. Farmers have been adapting to changes for centuries.
That's encouraging.
There will be new challenges, but I'm sure Indian goat farmers will figure it out. They always do.
I like that optimism. Okay, before we move on, there's one more thing I have to ask about. You mentioned goat cloning. Is this for real? Like making copies of goats in a lab?
Yep, you heard right. It happened back in 2012. Indian scientists cloned a pashmina goat. They named her Nuri.
Nori, the clone. Okay, hold on. How does that even work? What's
Yeah.
the point of making a genetically identical goat?
It's pretty complex, but essentially they take DNA from one goat and use it to create an embryo that's genetically the same. Then that embryo is implanted into a surrogate mother,
So it's like copy-pasting a goat's DNA.
basically. And in Nori's case, the goal was to see if they could replicate those goats with the highest quality pashmina wool.
So it's about having a reliable source of that luxurious fiber.
Exactly, like finding the pashmina lottery winner and making a whole team of them.
That's amazing. It sounds so futuristic, but I bet it also brings up some big questions.
It definitely does. Those are the kinds of questions we should be thinking about as this technology keeps developing.
What are some of the things we should be thinking about?
Well, for one thing, the ethics of it all.
Right, creating a whole herd of genetically identical goats.
Exactly. On the one hand, you've got this potential to make sure there's enough high-quality pashmina wool.
Which would be good for everyone, right?
Potentially. But there are also those questions about genetic diversity. What about the animal's well-being? Those have to be considered too.
It's definitely not a simple issue. It seems like every amazing scientific discovery comes with a whole new set of ethical questions.
It's true. But stepping back for a second, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We really have, from the sheer scale of goat farming in India.
To all those different breeds.
The economic impact, the good and the bad, even goat cloning, it's a lot to process.
It really highlights how complex agriculture is.
Right.
We often think of it as pretty straightforward.
Yeah, just planting seeds and raising animals.
But when you dig deeper, there's so much more to it. Tradition, innovation, economics, even ethics.
This deep dive has been fascinating. We started with a pretty simple question about goat farming in India, and it's opened up this whole new perspective on how interconnected everything is.
It's really amazing how something like a goat can do that.
It is, but for our listeners out there who might be wondering, what's the takeaway for them? Why should they care about goat farming in India?
It's a fair question. Why should any of this matter to someone who might never even see a goat farm in person?
Exactly, what's the so what here?
Well, one thing it shows is how connected our world really is. We talk about things like technology and fashion being global,
Right.
but agriculture, even something as specific as goat farming, plays a huge role in the global economy too.
It's easy to forget that the food we eat, the clothes we wear, the things we use all come from agriculture somewhere.
Exactly, and when we understand those systems, when we see where things come from, it helps us make better choices as consumers.
That's a good point.
Maybe you'll look for that made with Indian Pashmina label, or maybe you'll have a new appreciation for that goat cheese on your cheese board.
I know definitely going to be looking at labels differently. But it goes beyond just being a consumer, right? Millions of people in India rely on goat farming.
Absolutely, their livelihoods depend on it.
Supporting sustainable, ethical agriculture, that's something we can all get behind.
It's about remembering that our choices, even small ones, can have a big impact.
Absolutely. And, beyond all that, there's just the simple joy of learning something new. I had no idea how much there was to know about goat farming in India.
Me neither. I've learned so much about these animals and the people who raise them.
It's really incredible. This research paper got me thinking, could India, with all its resources and its history of goat farming, could it become the main player in the global goat market?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's not just about being number one either.
Right.
It's about the impact. What can it mean for how we produce food in the future? For sustainable agriculture, for new ideas in other industries?
Just like you said, everything's connected.
Exactly. What if what India is doing with goat farming could help other parts of the world?
It's amazing to think that something as seemingly ordinary as a goat could have such a big impact.
It really is. But that's what makes these deep dives so interesting. You never know where they'll lead.
I started this expecting to learn some fun facts about goats, and now I'm thinking about global agriculture, ethical dilemmas, the power of innovation, and maybe I am craving some goat cheese.
Well, on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of Indian goat farming.
A huge thank you to our expert for sharing their incredible insights.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listeners, as always, keep exploring, keep asking those questions, and you never know what you might discover.